Good evening. Thank you for joining us as we continue our study of the book of Revelation. It has been a true blessing to examine this book once again and to look at its awesome contents as we think about apocalyptic literature in general and certainly this apocalypse in particular. As we begin tonight, I do want to mention we have several lessons coming up, upcoming lessons on the book of Revelation. And so today, Wednesday, December 2nd, we're looking at chapters 14, finishing up, and also starting chapter 15. And we'll probably finish chapter 15 today as well, although we might review it on Sunday morning. And then on Sunday morning, on December 6th, we'll be looking at chapter 16, which is the next series of 7. We had the 7 seals on the scroll, which the Lamb was worthy to open. And then, of course, we had the 7 trumpets of the angels that were making these trumpet sounds, and many plagues and difficulties came upon the earth dwellers. And then we have the next series of 7, which would be the bowls of wrath, which begins in chapter 16. And so that will be something that we'll be looking at on the Lord's Day. And then next week on December 9th, we'll be looking at chapter 17, one of the most interesting chapters in the book, speaking about this great harlot, which is called Babylon. And then on December 13th, we'll look at chapter 18. And you can see the schedule right there on the slide in front of you, that we'll be proceeding with chapters 19. And then December 20th, we'll look at chapter 20, which is also another very interesting and enigmatic chapter. I wish we had several weeks to look at chapter 20, but we'll just look at it overview as we've been looking at this entire book, with the focus on approximately one chapter per lesson. And there'll be some obvious lessons that we've been reviewing as well. And then December 23rd, we'll be looking at chapter 21, and December 27th, chapters 22, and beginning a review on that day. And we'll continue with our review on the 30th of December. And so that will bring us to the end of 2020 and the end of our study of the book of Revelation, at least for this time looking at it. And so that's just the schedule we have for the next few weeks. And I want you to think about that and focus on that as we continue our study. Chapter 14 is the good news. As we were looking on Sunday morning, we mentioned that chapter 13 would consider to be the bad news, especially when we look at the sea beast, this horrible creature coming up out of the ocean, and then the earth beast also coming as a threat to the people of God. And so on the good side, the good news is found in chapter 14, which is addressed to the Christians that are redeemed from mankind as the first fruits of God and the Lamb. As verse 5 mentions, in their mouth there was no lie found, for they are spotless. And so you have the dichotomy of two groups of people that are really the focus of apocalyptic kinds of literature and apocalyptic language. And that is, you have the children of darkness on the one side, and you have the children of light on the other. And another way of talking about that would be those who dwell in heaven, that is, their citizenship and their loyalty and their allegiance is to heaven, even though they're temporarily living on planet Earth. And then you have those whose total allegiance and loyalty is to the earth life. And they have no problem worshiping the beast or the image of the beast, It is simply a procedure that they are normally used to doing. And so that's the opposite side of the children of light. They are the children of darkness. And so the 144,000, which we also encountered in chapter 7, have reference to the people of God, the children of God. And all of these images really are focused on the fact that these are the people of God and they have God's name written on their forehead. Now, let's talk about that for just a moment. God's name written on their forehead. Are we to envision this as some kind of tattoo that's literally placed on someone's forehead? Well, of course not, because this is a book of symbols, symbolic book, figurative language. It's not literally meant to be taken that way, and neither is the 144,000 literally meant to be taken as a particular number of the redeemed, that there are no more than that number. It is a symbolic number, as we've been thinking about. It's a series of 12 times 12, and we can think of that as either, the people of God, the 12 apostles and so forth, or the 12 tribes of Israel, focused on the spiritual way for New Testament worship as the people of God. If we go to the Old Testament prophecy of Nahum, in chapter 1, we have another reference that reminds us that certainly God identifies those individuals who are belonging to Him. God knows those that are His. And in Nahum chapter 1, verse 7, it tells us that Yahweh is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble. He knows those who take refuge in Him. And a parallel passage is found in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 19. In this passage, the Apostle Paul is speaking to young Timothy and telling him that God's firm foundation stands, bearing this seal: the Lord knows those who are His, and let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. And so the meaning is rather clear in this text in Revelation chapter 14 and verse 4, that the sheep follow the people follow the Lamb wherever He goes. And this is kind of an interesting image. And when we compare it with the Gospel of John in chapter 10 and verse 16. In this passage, the Gospel of John reminds us that the sheepfold that belongs to God involves two kinds of people, Jews and Gentiles. And so you have the Gentiles that came in after the Jews in the obedience of the gospel. And as Jesus is speaking here in verse 16, He says, I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will heed my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. And so the sheep follow the shepherd wherever the shepherd leads. And in this image, in the book of Revelation, it is turned around backwards, where the people are following the lamb, or the people are following the sheep. And that's not normally what happens. Sheep follow the shepherd. But in the image we see in the book of Revelation, the people follow the Lamb wherever He goes. And that's why God knows those that belong to Him. Peter agrees, speaking about the individuals who have been bought with the precious blood of Jesus Christ. God knows exactly those people that belong to Him. They are the ones who are spotless, without blemish, and as this text tells us, they are chaste, or virgins. That is, they are perfect and without any blemish at all. Continuing with our text in chapter 14 and verse 6, it tells us, Then I saw Another angel flying in mid-heaven with an eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation and tribe and tongue and people. And he said with a loud voice, "Fear God, and give him glory, for the hour of his judgment has come, and worship him who made heaven and earth, and the sea and the fountains of water." Another angel, a second, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who made all nations drink the wine of her impure passion." And so the eternal gospel is the gospel that is proclaimed to the entire world. And we understand from other passages in the New Testament that the earth continues and the world continues to give people the opportunity to repent of their sins and to confess their obedience to Jesus Christ as the Son of God. And the world continues until that is accomplished, and there'll be a time when God decides, of course, when that is, that all is done and everything will be consummated, and there will be no more opportunities for repentance. All opportunities will be gone. And the message is to fear God and give him glory. And that's the message that we need to proclaim today as well. We are God-fearers who are putting God first in our lives, and we want to glorify him. And certainly the hour of God's judgment has come. And this again reminds us of the lesson that Matt presented to us on Sunday as Felix was being told the same gospel that Paul was preaching to him about righteousness and self-control and the judgment to come. And the angel proclaims that Babylon is fallen. That is, it is like a prophetic perfect, that it is described in the perfect tense as if it has already occurred. And so you see that this Babylon, the Great, and we'll have more to say about that in upcoming studies, she who made the nations drink the wine of her impure passion, again having a reference to this idol worship that was going on. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also shall drink the wine of God's wrath, poured unmixed into the cup of his anger. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone, or sulfur, in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." As we mentioned before, the beast and its image, it refers to the sea beast, which is imperial Rome. And the earth dwellers worship this beast and receive a mark on the forehead or on his hand. Now, what this is up to much debate. We're not sure if this was some kind of a literal marking that was placed on the hand or the forehead. Certainly in the context of this kind of a literature, and also with historical references to what was actually happening in the Roman Empire, we don't have reference to that kind of a specific tattoo taking place on a literal basis. But it would be something that would be recognizable and identified, that the person would be able to worship Caesar, pinch incense unto Caesar, and therefore be authorized to buy and sell in the marketplace. And God is saying here, whoever does this will also drink the wine of God's wrath. And it's going to be full strength, that is tormented with fire and brimstone and so forth. So this is the danger of compromise. And the message is mainly to the heaven dwellers, Christians, who are reminded that their citizenship is in heaven and that they must always be loyal to God, and they must never commit idolatry and worship anyone else as if that person were God. And that, of course, would be blasphemous. And God is saying here, don't do this at all. And so this is yet another call for endurance. The smoke of their torment, verse 11 tells us, goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. Here is a call for the endurance of the saints, those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord henceforth. Blessed indeed, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow them." And I looked, and lo, a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man, with a golden crown on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. And of course, the sickle is going to be reaping the evildoers, those that are worshiping the beast and are worshiping the image of this beast. And the Christians are not going to participate in that. And verse 12 is again another reminder that the book is addressed to Christians in the first century that are in the crucible of Rome and the persecution against Christians that would not worship the image of the beast or be involved in emperor worship in any way. And so the message of the book from beginning to end is to call Christians to endure whatever ordeal or tribulation or challenge that is there coming their way, so that they might be pure and loyal and faithful unto God. Indeed, all blessings will come to those that are worshiping God in spirit and in truth. We've studied the Gospel of John and the famous 7 I am statements of Jesus. Like he would talk about, "I am the bread of life. He that comes to me will never hunger." And so there are 7 I am statements found in the Gospel of John. And here we have the writer John also using the number 7 in a multiple of ways, including blessings. There are 7 Beatitudes in the book of Revelation, and this is a good opportunity for us to simply review all of those, this one being the second one. The first time that this Beatitude or blessing was announced was in the very first chapter, where it talks about those who are blessed who read this book, and also those who hear the words of this prophecy. In chapter 14, the verse that we were just reading a moment ago, it tells us, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord." And that is a blessing that we can think about in terms of the positive benefits of death. We often think about that as a very negative thing, especially for loved ones that we miss and we are unable to communicate and enjoy their company anymore. But we look forward to that opportunity of being reunited with other Christians in heaven and other family members that are in heaven as we think about our own departure someday, or the Lord intervening with his return. And then in chapter 16, "Blessed is he who keeps his garments," that is, keeping our garments white. And that is a call for purity and not to have any spot or any kind of marking that would defile our beautiful white gown that we're wearing for God. And in chapter 19, "Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper." We have the opportunity to have fellowship with God and with Jesus Christ and with each other at this wonderful feast. Blessed is he who has a part in the first resurrection, and we'll be coming toward that in chapter 20, toward the end of the book. And the last chapter has two other blessings mentioned. Specifically, is he who keeps the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who wash their robes. Another reference to having our garments washed in the blood of the Lamb. So there are 7 blessings that are described in the book of Revelation, and here in chapter 14 we have the second one, and certainly this particular review has been rather superficial. Each of these 7 Beatitudes deserves a lot more attention, and I certainly recommend that you reflect and think about each one in the days ahead. And another angel came out of the temple, calling with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, "Put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe." So he who sat upon the cloud swung his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Then another angel came out from the altar, the angel who has power over fire, and he called out with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, "Put in your sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for its grapes are ripe." So the angel swung his sickle on the earth and gathered the vintage of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood flowed from the winepress as high as a horse's bridle for 200 miles. Well, here we have that wonderful image of the winepress of God and the grapes of wrath, as John Steinbeck used in one of his novels several years ago. This classic imagery of the winepress is a symbol of judgment, and it first occurs in the book of Joel. There, divine justice is wielded against the wicked nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat. And of course, the terms sickle, harvest, winepress, and overflowing vats are used here as God's wrathful retribution against the wicked. Another example is found in Isaiah's prophecy against Edom. In chapter 63, we see that the Lord is depicted as wearing blood-stained robes, treading down the strength of Edom in vengeful fury. You think about the image of someone who's treading the grapes in a wine press and just crushing the grapes, and the wine is flowing into the vats, overflowing. And that imagery certainly would have been recognizable throughout the ancient world of the Mediterranean in the time of the Roman Empire, and certainly in Israel in the first century, where people would crush their grapes as the blessings that come from God, and the grapes would be crushed, and the grape juice would flow, and then this would be used for nourishment and drink later on. And so here that imagery is used in terms of a judgment, that the grape juice splashing up on someone's garments would create a stain, and it would be looking almost like blood. And so one of the reasons that this image was used for judgment is because of the similarity between the color of wine and the color of blood. And so this is a representation of God's judgment. Now, of course, it's not literal. I mean, think about the amount of blood that is described here. Think about blood reaching up to the horse's bridle. This could be about 4 feet high, something in that vicinity. And what would the volume of blood be if it was 4 feet high times 200 miles? And this would be just a ridiculous amount of blood. It's not to be interpreted literally, but it's still a very terrible thought. And that image is what we're supposed to think about. And certainly the picture here is one of judgment to a strong degree. The fact that the blood came out of the wine press rather than wine assures us that this is all figurative, metaphorical language, which is something that we expect in the apocalypse. Chapter 15 begins, "Then I saw another portent in heaven, great and wonderful, 7 angels with 7 plagues, which are the last, for with them the wrath of God is ended. And I saw what appeared to be a sea of glass mingled with fire, and those who had conquered the beast and its image and the number of its name standing beside the sea of glass with harps of God in their hands. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and wonderful are thy deeds, O Lord God the Almighty. Just and true are thy ways, O King of the ages." And so here's yet another sign that focuses on these 7 angels with the 7 bowls of wrath. And the bowls of wrath are certainly intended to be poured out full strength upon the earth dwellers, not the heavenly dwellers, not those who have been marked and identified by God as his lambs, his sheep that follow him, or the people that follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These are the people who conquered the beast. How did they conquer the beast, the Roman Empire? How could humble Christians be victorious over the mighty King Domitian, Caesar of Rome? Well, they are conquering by refusing to worship the beast, refusing to worship Caesar, and the image and the number of its name, as we go back to the 666. They conquered the beast. They're standing with God, with the harps of God in their hands. And they sing this new song that we were focused on in chapter 14. And this is identified now as the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, which is putting together the people of God from the Old Testament and also the people of God from the New Testament. Great and wonderful are thy deeds, O God, and just and true are your ways. Even in the judgment, even in the vengeful wrath that is coming now upon the earth dwellers, God is just in doing that. He is great and wonderful in that deed as well, because of the justice that is being poured out upon all of those who had destroyed God's people, who had caused them to become martyrs, and who were crying out before God as the souls under the altar, asking God, "How long, sovereign and true God, will you until you avenge our blood upon those that dwell on the earth?" And the message is now coming upon them. This is the last of the plagues, and it's going to come full upon the earth dwellers. And with these 7 plagues, the wrath of God will be complete and finished. In the last verse here where it talks about the King of the ages, I will note that there is a textual variation on some of the Greek manuscripts that say nations instead of ages. And so that would be, just and true are your ways, O King of the nations. That is God judging the nations as one who is powerful and more powerful than they. Who shall not fear and glorify your name, O Lord? For thou alone art holy. All nations shall come and worship thee, for thy judgments have been revealed. After this I looked, and the temple of the tent of witness in heaven was opened. And out of the temple came the 7 angels with the 7 plagues, robed in pure white linen and bright linen, and their breasts girded with golden girdles. And one of the 4 living creatures gave the 7 angels 7 golden bowls full of the wrath of God, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God, from his power. And no one could enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were ended. The writer John tells us here that the judgments have been revealed, and they were revealed to John as he was on the island of Patmos and received these tremendous visions. And of course, he committed that vision to writing in this book of Revelation, which we understand as the Apocalypse. And you have 7 series of plagues that are coming upon the earth dwellers, and this is the last series of 7. We've looked at the 7 seals, and then the 7 trumpets, and now the 7 bowls of wrath. And the 7 angels are given these bowls by one of the 4 living creatures, and he gives the 7 angels these 7 bowls. They're golden bowls, and they're full of the wrath of God, and they're about to be poured upon the earth dwellers. And we'll be looking at that in chapter 16. But this is the full wrath of God that is coming upon those who worship the beast and his image. This vision, of course, reminds us that the bowls of wrath emanate from heaven. It is a heavenly judgment upon the earth dwellers. It also reminds Christians, those who are in the crucible of the Roman persecution, those who are enduring the struggle, that the judgments that they are witnessing come from God, and it will be avenging them and what they have gone through, what they have had to endure, the ordeal that they've had to struggle with in this conflict against the Roman Empire and all of those who would call upon Christians to worship the image of the beast. And in our generation, any kind of call to compromise, any kind of call to put others and other things first other than the things of God would be a similar kind of an appeal for us. The application that we can make from this is that we want to always be identified as those who are the individuals who follow the Lamb wherever he goes, and that we want to have the comfort of being with God in heaven. And of course, chapters 21 and 22 remind us in beautiful language what that will be like. But here, this passage is again focusing on the judgment that is coming upon the earth dwellers. Sunday, Lord willing, we'll continue with chapter 16, where we will be focusing on, in detail, these 7 bowls of wrath. Thank you for joining us tonight as we have been exploring this wonderful book of Revelation. And I hope that the study has been beneficial to you and that you will reflect on this in the next few days and think about it as we continue our examination of the Apocalypse on Sunday morning. May God bless you.